So then the organism is always looking in the external environment to determine what's going to be a threat, always concerned about its body and where it has to, how it has to take care of it, and it's always concerned about time. How much time do I have to get there? The body, the environment, and time. Now, when you and I live by the hormones of stress, the very fact that we're releasing all these chemicals, by paying all of our attention on the external environment, we focus on objects and things, and we believe that the outer world is more real than the inner world. And this is where we start to feel separation. Now, why do we feel separation? Because the hormones of stress cause us to begin to really begin to understand or perceive reality as a materialist, defining reality with our senses. So the atom is 99.9999999% nothing. It's energy, it's emptiness, it's open space. It's 0.0000001% particle. And when we're living by the hormones of stress, we're focusing on the particle instead of on possibility. And this is where we get in trouble, because when we get to this point and we experience that level of separation, we always try to force and control outcomes in our life because we are matter trying to change matter. In other words, when we live by the hormones of stress, we feel more like matter and less like energy because we are fundamentally functioning as a particle instead of possibility. So then people then begin to use what they know in terms of their limited resources to get what they want. They compete, they manipulate, they lie, they cheat, they steal, they do what they can to try to get ahead in their life because for the most part, they don't know that there's any other way to do it. They're functioning from a primitive nervous system. But when people begin to get beyond themselves, and we've studied the brains in the workshops that we've done, and you and I are absolutely at our best when we get beyond ourselves. The moment you become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, in no time, the moment you and I become pure consciousness, the moment we get beyond our identities, our bodies, our faces, our culture, our gender, our hairstyles, our wardrobes, we get beyond the things we own, the people we know, the places we lived, we get beyond our pain, our emotions, our habits. That's the moment we're no longer trying to predict the familiar future based on the memory of the past. That's the moment we become pure consciousness. In other words, we become thought alone. And that's the moment the body is literally releasing energy. And we go from particle to wave, from matter to energy. And the side effect of that is our heart begins to open. The brain gets very coherent. The heart begins to work with the brain. We broadcast a whole new electromagnetic signature. And instead of trying to predict the worst case scenario and get ready for it, we trust in the unknown. We trust in possibility. We begin to lay down the very thing we used our whole life to get what we want for something greater to occur. And so it's a skill, and you can teach people how to do this. And when people stop living by those limited emotions and they start opening their heart, they feel connected to something greater. And the moment they feel connected to something greater, they're no longer trying to force or control the outcome. They're getting out of the way and allowing the universe to organize it in a way that's just right for them. So the problem, I think, for most of us, me included, to answer your question, is that you and I and most people in our lives, we wait for our life to get so unbearable that crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis or loss, something has to bring us to this lowest denominator in order for us to want to change. And this is a beautiful time in history, Panache, because people are beginning to realize that they don't have to wait for that. They can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or they can learn and change in a state of joy or inspiration. So, is there a connection between our authentic self and the soul, and how do we get there? Well, I think for most of us then, we begin to, we're young and we have a lot of confusing things that happen to us in our life, and when we're young, most of our attention is on our inner world. And as we begin to grow up and we meet friends and we move to different places and we own different things, we become very consumed with the external environment. And we begin to create an identity by the people we know and the places we go and the things we do. And all of our attention goes to the external environment. and we don't want to pay a lot of attention to our inner world. So that works probably for the first 35 or 40 years of our life. And then after you experience everything that life has to offer, all of a sudden nothing's making that feeling go away. And this is the moment the soul begins to wake us up and say, pay attention, because nothing is making that feeling change. So in other words, when you can predict the feeling of everything that's going on in your life, and nothing new is happening, all of a sudden you're left with those feelings from very early on, whether it's emptiness or unworthiness or insecurity. And so then this is where people all of a sudden have to make a choice. Some people, they buy the sports car, they buy the new boat, they join the new social club, they meet new people, they have affairs, they go on vacation to a new place, they buy new things. But when the novelty of all of those events wear off, here comes that feeling again. And so then other people, they begin to look at those emotions and they don't want to keep that facade going on any longer. In other words, this is how we appear to the world. This is the facade, this is the identity, this is the image, and this is how we really feel inside. Now, this person is identifying, creating an identity with the external world so that nobody knows how they really feel inside. Now, everybody's doing the same exact thing. So God forbid anybody finds out that we're insecure or feeling empty. So you have to keep this facade going on with your identity and the environment and your body and the way you look and how busy you are, so that you don't have to look at this. Now, some people begin to look at this feeling, and this is the midlife crisis. This is where they say, I don't love you. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't like those people. I don't want to keep this going any longer anymore. And they begin to pay attention to this feeling. Now, there's not a lot of structure in our Western world to do that. So the moment people begin to lose their mind and they begin to tell the truth about who they are, they begin to break their emotional bonds with everybody in their life. That's when they go to the doctor and get Prozac, and there they go. They return right back to that person. But this gap between how we appear to the world and who we really are inside is based on the amount of emotions that we've memorized from past experiences. Now, when we begin, there's pain there, there's sadness there, there's unworthiness there, there's insecurity there, and we're not looking for the external environment to make this feeling go away. In other words, we start looking at how we think when we feel this way, how we act when we feel this way, and we begin to move through those emotions, and we begin to overcome them. Every time we overcome an emotion, we liberate energy, and we begin to close the gap between how we appear to the world and who we are inside, until how we appear is who we are. We've liberated all this energy. That's the moment we call transparency, and that's the moment where the person is truly happy, no longer needing anything outside of them to make them happy, but the true happiness is coming from within them. In other words, so many people confuse pleasure and happiness. And pleasure is the accumulation of things to feel good, and happiness is coming from within. So that intelligence that's giving us life right now, that's digesting our food and organizing trillions of functions in one cell every single second and organizing DNA, that self-organizing intelligence is looking for a crack to leak out. And when it begins to leak out, it begins to consume us. And that's the moment we become like it. We become more loving. It's a loving intelligence. We become more mindful. It's a great mind. We become more willful. It's got an amazing will. Its nature becomes our nature. We become more giving. It's a giver of life. So I think when we begin to all of a sudden realize that there's nothing wrong with the accumulation of things, but I think we've been conditioned into believing that true happiness, changing everything in our external world, and true change comes from trying to do it from the outside instead of doing it from within. And I think this is, again, really important for us, because as we begin to overcome that, those limited states, the body's no longer living in the past. And that's where most of our pain comes from, is when the body's living in the past. And we've measured so many people in the process of transformation. And when they get beyond their past, they're pretty unlimited people. And the side effect of that is true joy and true expression of life, which I call the natural state of being. So when people are living in this gap between how they appear to the world and how they really feeling, they don't want to look at this emotion because it is painful. What they'd rather do is distract themselves from all these things in their external environment so they don't have to look. But when that feeling isn't going away, and they can't, after the sports car and after the, the vacation and after the buying the new things, the new wardrobe, the facelift, whatever, and this feeling keeps returning, this is a time really where they have to look at that emotion. And they have to, as you said, you have to be in the presence of that emotion and ask some fundamental questions. Are these emotions driving my thoughts? How do I think when I feel this way? Now, those thoughts are just old circuits that have been fired and wired in the brain. How do I behave? What do I do? How do I act? What do I say? What comes out of my mouth? Now think about this. If you can observe how you're thinking, notice how you're acting, and pay attention to how you're feeling, the moment you become conscious of what you're unconscious to, it means you're no longer the program. Now you're the consciousness observing the program, and this is when we begin to objectify our subjective selves. And the more we can look at ourselves through the eyes of someone else, the more conscious we can become of that, the less unconscious we're prone to be in our normal life. The quantum model of reality is about causing an effect, which means you have to teach your body emotionally what empowerment feels like before your success. You have to be whole before your healing. You have to be in awe before the mystical moment. You have to feel freedom and abundance before your wealth appears. And when we do that, then to the materialist it would seem really insane or foolhardy because the event hasn't happened. But to the quantum mind, though, the body is getting a sampling of the future before the experience occurs. And if we do this properly and we marry it with a clear intention, the body begins to believe it's in the future instead of in the past. And now we're defined by a vision of the future instead of a memory of the past. And so we teach people how to come out of their resting state. Unfortunately, as I said, most people wait for the crisis to come out of their resting state and where they say this is enough. But everybody already knows how to do this, because everybody that's on this call has already done something great in their life. And what did they do? They made a decision. They had a vision. They got inspired by that vision. They decided what thoughts would support them to that vision, what behaviors and choices they were going to make. They felt enthusiastic, and they began to get their behaviors to match their intention, and they changed. Now think about it when we set out to do something and we didn't accomplish it. We got lazy, we had a vision, we got emotional, we got too busy, stress got in the way, we had social appointments, and we traded that vision for mediocrity. So we come out of our resting state and the body has to be energized with a new frequency. And we were capturing in our last workshop probably 40,000 times the amount of energy in people's brains when they did this. Now, 40,000 times the amount of energy, give you an idea. When people's brains are firing in normal, limited consciousness, we're about 10 to 60 microvolts squared of energy. We're talking about 1,000,000 microvolts of energy in a person's brain. I mean, you can charge your iPhone with that. That is how powerful we really are. So then, as we begin to overcome and overcome and overcome those limitations that block the flow of the divine in us, as we begin to remove those layers, we begin to feel connected to something greater. And then the next challenge appears. So when we begin to get our mind and body right, and we begin to look at what piece of knowledge could we apply to this adversity, to change something about ourselves, to get closer to source, I think that when people really begin to realize that there's no structure out there, there's structure for drugs, there's structure for alcohol, there's structure for gambling, there's structure for video gaming or overeating or shopping or all of consumerism. You take a pill and it makes that feeling go away immediately. You're going to correlate that internal change with whatever you did to take that, and you're going to develop an attachment or an addiction. And what that does is it begins to broaden the gap. And you could be the wealthiest, the most successful, the most popular person, the most good-looking person in the world, but if you haven't overcome that emotion right there, you haven't evolved in one lifetime. And this is where we have to begin to look at where we're going to make the biggest contribution to ourselves, because as we begin to understand that the soul cannot create a future experience, and the soul wants to really have new events and novel experiences. If you're living by the same emotion every single day, and you're anchored emotionally in your past, and your body's been conditioned emotionally to be in the past, then until you overcome that emotion, the soul can't get on with creating anything new, because for the most part, you're bound to a past experience. So when we begin to overcome the emotions, then we're literally pulling our mind out of the past, and that's when we begin to create a new future. Because the simple premise is this: your personality creates your personal reality. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So the present personality, called Panache, has created the present personal reality called his life. So if Panache wants to create a new personal reality, a new life, then he's got to begin to become conscious of those thoughts he's been thinking and change them. Become aware of his behaviors and his emotions and alter those. And I think most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality, and it doesn't work. We literally have to become someone else. So then, if you begin to embrace this paradigm on the deepest level, then the soul's real desire is really to experience the unknown, to experience something new. And so if you're living and feeling the same way every single day, then it means nothing new is happening in your life. And that boredom right now, I'm going to speak for you, that boredom, or that predictable, familiar emotion, is what's nagging at you and bothering you, because you know on a soul level there's more to experience. So then, as you begin to look at the old identity, and this is where we get stuck, is that for most people, it's their personal reality that's creating their personality. You know, it's the media and the social engagements and the advertising and television and and the people and things in our life. We're reacting to everything known in our life, and by consciously or unconsciously, when we see certain people, we go to certain places, we do certain things at the exact same time. It's the external environment that's controlling how we think and feel. So if you understand that, then it would be a good idea to eliminate yourself from your external environment. That's called meditation. Mm-hmm. You close your eyes, and now you have less sensory information coming into your brain. You put in earplugs or you play music, and that fills the space. So now your inner world starts becoming more real than your outer world. You put your body away. You're no longer your body. You're no longer a face. You're no longer identity. And if you do it properly, you'll forget about time. Now, that elegant moment where you dissociate from your body, your identity, your things in your life, the people in your life, the places in your life, and time, that's the moment you become pure consciousness. Now, if you're thinking certain thoughts that are making certain chemicals for you to feel a certain way, and the moment you feel that way, you think more thoughts, and those thoughts create more feelings, and your brain is organized to reflect everything you know in your life. It's an artifact of the past. You're thinking in the past, and those emotions that feel familiar are a record of the past. And for the most part, people are trying to view their future through the lens of the past. They can't get anywhere. So then, as we begin to no longer think and feel in that cycle, and we dissociate into thought alone, the energy that's feeding all of our sexual identity, all of our digestion, all of the energy for importance and control and the adrenal hormones, all that energy has got to go somewhere. And the first place it goes right into the heart. And you know you're getting close when all of a sudden you start to feel your heart open up. When that occurs, the moment that occurs, you're no longer living in your past identity. That's the moment you're completely in the present moment. Now, there's dangers to be in the present moment. There's dangers to express love. There's dangers to trust, because if you're living in an environment where survival is the credo, you're not going to want to close your eyes and go within. You're not going to want to trust anybody. You know, this is not a time really to relax. This is a time to be vigilant. So then people they can intellectually understand it, but they can't get to that level, because They're always perceiving their environment as the jungle. So when we begin to overcome those emotions of stress that are highly addictive, the body is no longer being tormented like an addict. That is when the body starts to liberate energy, and that's when our heart starts to open, and that's when we start to believe in possibility again. So if our personality creates our personal reality, we make a decision first. We examine who we've been, and I call it crossing the river of change, from the old self to the new self. Crossing that river is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar, and you are going to feel like it's unpredictable, because the moment you're no longer thinking that way or acting that way or feeling that way, you're going to feel like an unknown. Now, this is the biological, the neurological, the chemical, and even genetic death of the old self. This is the pain that you experience because the body's looking for its familiar chemical state. That pain is normal, and if you understand that void, that unknown, is the perfect place to create in. That's the place you want to create in, and not to fear it, but to embrace it. And your body's craving the familiar chemicals that it's addicted to. Then you might want to say when you're in that place, well, the best way to predict my future is to create it, not from the known, but from the unknown. Now, this perfect place of creation is where people begin to do the uncommon. This is where their soul begins to speak to them. This is where they see a greater purpose for themselves in their lives, and they're no longer playing by the small-minded games any longer, because they're connected to some bigger vision in the future. I think transformation is really the one thing that I'm more passionate about than anything else. And so I think number one, taking time out of our busy day for ourselves is the greatest service that we can do for ourselves, for our family, for the people we work with, and for our community. Now, if most people's attention is on their external environment, on their body, and on time, and they wake up every morning and they get out of bed and they do the same thing they've been doing for the last 20 years, then their body's already programmed into a predictable future. Their body's already on autopilot. They have a thought of the coffee pot, and the next thing they know, they have coffee in their hand. They have a thought of the shower, the next thing they know, they're in the shower. They have a thought about going to work, the next thing they know, they're in their car. So their body is following their mind. If they're living by the same emotions every single day, then their body, for the most part, is in the past, because emotions are a record of the past. So finding the sweet spot of the present moment in our meditation is so highly important, because the body has been trained to be in the future. So then most people, when they take their meditation and they stick it in as another thing to do so they don't have to feel guilty, that's not the answer either. Working with your body and understanding that it's the animal, and we do this in our workshops. We make people, we don't make them, we ask them in their meditations to really get to that point where they're unfolding in that infinite field of potentials as thought alone. In other words, if you're going to heal yourself by thought alone, or create something in your life by thought alone, then you have to become thought alone. This is the key element where all of a sudden now, when you keep practicing bringing your body back into the present moment, and you become aware that it's thinking about, or what about this thing I have to do, and this plane I have to catch, and this contract I have to sign, and that person I have to call, that's a predictable future. And you become aware that you're investing your energy into that reality, because where you place your attention is where you place your energy. Or you're living by some emotion of impatience or frustration or vigilance, then you're siphoning energy out of the present moment, and you have no energy to create with. So every time you become conscious that you're moving out of the present moment, and just like riding an unbridled stallion, every time you bring that body back into the present moment and you relax it back down into the present moment and you surrender into nothing, every time you do that, you're reconditioning your body to a new mind. In other words, you're not allowing your body to become the mind. Now, people will say, well, that's going to take a lot of work. And I say to them, well, what's the alternative? What do you want to do? Do you want to do drugs? I mean, nothing is going to help you to get to the present moment but you. And if you practice being present every single day in your meditations, you will be more present in your life and less preoccupied with that worst case scenario, or that moment where something could go wrong, and living by those hormones of stress. And your body then finally starts to trust you. And when your body finally starts to trust you is the moment it's not worried about the unknown. The unknown is no longer